Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Signed, sealed, remembered, home on the Circle G. And if you've been with us for the previous episodes, you'll know that we're deep into a deep dive about the Circle G, and that's what we're going to be continuing with today. Hi, Colleen. Hi, Gunn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you. And today we're going to start with a story about the bridge. The bridge on the Circle G. As we take this journey into Elvis Presley's Mississippi ranch life of 1967. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Hi, Anna. Thank you for coming. Appreciate seeing you both. And on screen, we can see a picture of the barn at Graceland, where everything started. Elvis bought his horses, found one he really liked. He called it the Rising Sun. The barn became the House of the Rising Sun, and then the barn was too full. Just too many people there. So we come to the Circle G, and on this property there was a bridge that crossed the lake. Jack Adams built the lake, and he built the bridge. He was the guy who owned the property and sold it to Elvis. And this bridge was always lighted. And there used to be a sign. I don't know if it's still there, but it once stood at the bridge, which spans over the water of the Circle G. And the sign said, "Bridge erected as shortcut across the lake. Elvis crossed it once, riding sun, while it was covered with snow and ice. It was always lighted." And that's a memory etched in frost. And I think we could date that memory to sometime in March of 1967, because that's when there was a freak snowstorm. We've heard Donna Presley tell us about it, and how Elvis pulled everybody around with a tractor, kind of like a sleigh ride. Hello, Marion. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. But the thing that started this all, it was the cross that he saw. And that's what this song is about, the cross on the circle, which I wrote to commemorate the Circle G.
He saw the cross at dawn and said, "It's a good omen, and a dream again." At the break of dawn, through the window pane, he saw a cross in morning rain, white as grace, tall as prayer, calling him to build and share. Not a kingdom, not a throne, but a place of love alone, where laughter rides on horse's breath and peace outshines the fear of death. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, Just a handshake and a name. Come home where the cross stands tall. Come and share the love of all. Mobile homes and barbecue nights, trucks and trials and porch light rides, the hand-picked heart to share the dream, a mythic village by the stream. This is more than land, it's grace, refuge carved in sacred space, a gift of love to friends and kin, protected from the world's loud din. Come home to the circle and the sign, where the lake reflects the holy line. No one needs money, no one needs fame, just a handshake and a name. Come home, where the cross stands long. Come and share the love of all. Oh, come and share the love of all.
Thank you all for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today, we come home to the grounds of the Circle G. And as we talk about dating the story that we just heard, thinking that it was probably in March because of the snowstorm, we come up against another dating discrepancy amongst all of these stories. And Gunn says that was another lovely song. Thank you so much, Gunn. I appreciate that. And here we can see that bridge from that story. And this is a difficult bridge to ride across on a horse. And that horse really has to trust you, especially if it's covered with snow and ice. And I don't see any lights on the bridge in this picture, so there must have been lights once upon a time. And I don't see the sign that's referenced in the story. So maybe it's not there anymore. But the deed is still there. Elvis rode that horse across this bridge. Now, we've learned earlier that Gary Pepper, in a previous episode, Gary Pepper is Elvis's friend. He lives near Elvis. He's in the house next to Vernon Presley on Dolan Street. Gary's father works as a gate guard for Elvis, and he works out at the Circle G as a guard out there for Elvis. Gary gathers stories about Elvis. He talks to Elvis personally, and he sends these stories to fanzines, publications that are being printed by mostly Elvis fan clubs. And Gary Pepper says that Elvis flew in a Learjet on February 21st, 1967, to Nashville to record tracks for Clambake. And that he toured the Circle G by air on the return trip that same day. Now we know that Elvis did view the Circle G from a plane because it comes up in multiple stories. But Gary's given us a specific date. But according to authors, Kimberly Gatto and Victoria Rassimo, and I can only hope that I'm saying their names correctly, but they wrote a fairly wonderful book, and it's called All the King's Horses. So if you've never read that book, it's definitely a very interesting read about all of the horses that they could track down that Elvis had owned at one point in his life. And they say that the date that Elvis went to record was February 23rd. Not really sure what source they pulled that from, but I'm assuming they researched it, and it comes up as the 23rd. Now, I haven't researched the two dates yet. I'm just bringing forward that there are discrepancies in these stories and in facts that are recorded, and then we've got to, as we look at these different pieces, figure out how do they really fit together. The emotional truth is there, but the factual truth is it's obscured. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. Now, Kimberly and Victoria, they say that they don't mention whether it was a Lear jet, but they say that the jet was owned by Elvis's neighbor, who is Kimmons Wilson. Now, I'm assuming that neighbor is a Circle G neighbor. They're not specific. He may live somewhere in Memphis near Graceland. In fact, I know he lives somewhere in Memphis because he's the guy who founded the Holiday Inn. And he's a friend of Sam Phillips. So Sam Phillips is the man who recorded Elvis in the very beginning. He's the man that recorded That's All Right, Mama. He's the man that gave it to Dewey Phillips, who then played it on the radio. And that sparked everything. So Sam owned the Memphis recording studio, and he owned some radio stations, and he'd made some money. But he wasn't making great money at any of those things. He was a smart businessman, Sam Phillips, and he was able to make profits off all of these things. But he made his real money when this other gentleman, Kimmons Wilson, offered to let him buy in on the Holiday Inn before it really got started. And then these two made a killing off of that. And that's how Sam Phillips really got a lot of his money, as well as Kimmons Wilson. And Kimmons loaned Elvis his plane to make the trip to Nashville. And Elvis wore his Circle G cowboy clothes to the recording session, complete with his chaps and his hat. So I don't know if it's the hat that we see in this picture, because this was around the same time at Graceland, when he was riding the horses out there. It's not really a cowboy hat, so I think he was a little more cowboyed up when he went in and recorded those songs for Clambake. And we know that he didn't really enjoy those songs. And perhaps by actually wearing the attire of the ranch, you know, he wasn't just thinking about the ranch, he was still living the ranch while he was there doing those recordings. And it conflicted with the lack of soul that's in the recordings, right? They're fluff. And Elvis was looking for deep at this moment. and his clothing was reminding him, we're looking for deep, but he ends up recording this fluff. And then he comes back to the Circle G, and he rides very hard, and he ends up getting the saddle sores because he's still got to leave and film Clam Bake. Now, Kimberly and Victoria, they also reference Dr. Nick's account of meeting Elvis on the ranch, which we've looked at in a couple of previous episodes. And we know that Charlie Hodge, at least according to Dr. Nick's account, and that's the account that is referenced here because they're using Charlie Hodge. Charlie Hodge called Dr. Nicopolis through a phone service, and he said that Elvis's regular physician was not available, and could Dr. Nick come and see Elvis? And Dr. Nick came out and he treated him for saddle sores. Now here's exactly what Kimberly and Victoria say. They say, as Elvis's physician was not available to examine him on that Sunday afternoon, Charlie Hodge arranged for him to be seen by Memphis physician Dr. George Nicopolis, with whom Hodge was acquainted. So that's basically the story that Dr. Nick told, but it's compressed. But they, Kimberly and Victoria, have missed the fact, just like Dr. Nick did, that this doesn't really have anything to do with Elvis's physician not being available to examine him on that Sunday afternoon. Because ask yourself, do you believe that Elvis did business with any physician or any other professional of any industry who was unavailable to Elvis at any time? There are dozens of stories of professionals of all kinds visiting Elvis at extremely odd hours, summoned by phone calls for an immediate audience. This is the way that Elvis did business, and if you were not able to meet these requirements of being available on a moment's notice at a very odd hour, you probably were not going to do business with Elvis. And almost everyone was willing to do business with Elvis. They were willing to make these sacrifices because that's when Elvis was available, including his physicians, like his dentist. Like we see that on the night before Elvis passes away, he sees his dentist in the middle of the night. Dr. Nick was chosen by Elvis, and this was the moment that Elvis chose to initiate contact to start Dr. Nick's part in the adventure. And if you want to hear more about that, be sure to watch those previous episodes. The point here is that not only did Dr. Nick not understand what Elvis had done, he didn't understand that he was going through a series of tests and was then in the inner circle because Elvis chose to bring him in. These other people that study Elvis and they write books and such, they don't see it either. These events that happened on the Circle G and elsewhere in Elvis's life, they didn't just happen. Elvis wasn't famous because he got really lucky. Elvis was very active in directing his life. He made a lot of very specific choices, and he acted in certain ritualistic ways, like in the giving of his gifts. They all had purpose, they all had meaning, and he built things through his works. And here he's building this Circle G, this perfect utopia, because he's not able to build things within his professional life at this moment, trapped by the contracts for the movies, trapped by the contracts for the movie soundtracks, which he's not really excited about. And Circle G is giving him an opportunity to reclaim his direction, his self-direction of his own life. So he's resetting here on the Circle G, and when he comes back out, everything becomes different. That's when we go to the 68 special. That's when we go to the return from live to live performances in 1969. So Dr. Nick coming into the story at this moment, this isn't an accident. Nothing that's happening on this ranch is an accident. Now, Elvis is being stymied. People are trying to stop him. And we can see that in this story about the house that wasn't built. So we saw in a previous episode that Marty and his brother-in-law Bernie, and Bernie is the man who built the meditation garden at Graceland. He remodeled Elvis's bedroom. He built the waterfall in the jungle room. Bernie's fingerprints are all over Graceland. He was the architect. He's the guy who actually planned these things and then worked with the contractors to bring them to fruition. And some of them he had a lot of difficulty with, like the waterfall in the jungle room. But at this time, Elvis had just moved, well, not just moved, he had bought the ranch. They had spent a night there in the little house that was there. Elvis understood that house wasn't big enough for him. He wanted to build a much larger house. Some have described it as a replica of Graceland, but he was having all new plans drawn up. So this was going to be something more spectacular than Graceland. Like the trailers that came after this idea, it was going to be new. No one else would have ever lived there. It was going to have the best of everything. All the modern conveniences. So Marty and Bernie had flown to look at a house in Los Angeles because Elvis had been looking to purchase a house in Los Angeles. So they went to look at one he had seen that he really liked but didn't actually lease or purchase. And he wanted something similar to that, and he wanted Bernie to be able to see those ideas. So Marty and Bernie flew out there. Now, Marty told us in an earlier quote that had been right at the same time Elvis had left to go back to Hollywood to film Clambake. And he's told us once that when Elvis got there was some discussion between them about the house, and Elvis said that Vernon, his daddy, didn't think it was a good idea to grant each of the Memphis Mafia members any land to make their own house. And that's all connected back to this idea of his house. So there's already been a discussion about these other houses, the ones that the Memphis Mafia would build, and Elvis would pay the down payment, and then they would pay off the rest and own it themselves. Those houses have been put on hold. But there's still this idea that Elvis is going to build his own house. And in a later telling of the story, Marty's told us that Marty was actually there when they told Vernon about these ideas, and Vernon nixed them. That his face showed that he was not in favor of these ideas. And we discussed that the first story is probably more true than the second story, but that Marty, he sees Vernon as the ultimate villain here, the one who blocked what was going to happen. And Gunn says it's so sad that Elvis felt trapped by the movies, but he's so glad he made them for the fans to see. Yeah, I don't think the movies were as bad as he felt they were at the time. And Carolyn agrees that she loves all those wonderful movies. Yeah, I think that if Elvis could see the landscape of entertainment today and understand that his movies all form a large collection of family friendly movies, movies that you can watch with children of all ages, basically, and not, people of all ages, and not be ashamed or wonder whether things are going to be said that you don't want said in front of certain people. That entertainment doesn't really exist that much anymore. Even Disney doesn't really make that entertainment anymore. So I believe that there'll be a cycle where Elvis's stuff comes back and will be extremely popular, especially in certain circles, because it's very clean, family-oriented entertainment. But now they're talking about the house that Elvis wants. And it's part of this same idea. And Marty Lacker says that evening, and I'm not sure exactly what evening he's talking about. I believe an evening in Los Angeles during the filming of Clambake. Marty says that evening, Elvis seemed unhappy and disturbed. For some time, he didn't say what was wrong until I mentioned that I had spoken to Bernie about the house plans. He looked at me and he said, "The house isn't going to be built and I don't want to talk about it." Elvis never did discuss it either, but later I learned that even though Elvis wanted it, Vernon had dissuaded him. So Marty tells us another story about another dream that Elvis is not going to be able to make come real. He's not going to be able to build this house that he wants, at least not at this moment. And whatever it is that's keeping him from building it, he doesn't want to talk about it. The house isn't going to be built, and I don't want to talk about it. This discussion is done. This dream has been set aside. It's very early on in the Circle G days for the dreams to begin to be set aside. Hi, Jules Human. I don't think I've seen you here before. Welcome to the show. Oh, I see Jewel must refer to the bird that's in the little picture. I used to have some birds like that too. Very nice. My favorite bird of all time was a budgerigger, a regular parakeet. Cost about $20 or $25. Had a blue one, and it was so smart and learned so many tricks. I did have some bigger ones. But none of them ever really matched up to that one little budgerigger. Oh, hi, Linda. Jules Human is Linda. Good to see you. But Marty, not only has he learned that the plans are over, he's blamed this on Vernon as well. Says that later he learns. Doesn't tell us how he learned that or what led him to believe it, but he says it's Vernon. And I think there's a need on people's part to blame someone when things don't pan out the way that they want them to. At least at this point in time with these guys, they like to personify the change in fortune and point to very specific people and say that it was their fault. I'm not sure it's true that it was those people's fault. I think that sometimes things just don't work out. And that even Elvis, with all of his money, had dreams that were more than his money could support. Just like all of us. But in this instance, Elvis invokes a mythic silence. He doesn't want to talk about his heartache, which is now in blueprint form. Billy Smith, his cousin, his best friend at the end, said Vernon used the excuse that he talked to a lawyer and an accountant, and they said the zoning laws and other restrictions wouldn't let him do it. So I'm not sure in that quote if Billy's talking specifically about the house Elvis wanted to build or the houses that he wanted to have built for the Memphis Mafia, or the whole plan altogether. But Billy also blames Vernon. But it's strange here because you see a lot of people complain about Vernon that he was ignorant and he didn't know anything and he was too dumb to bring people in. Well, here he's gone to professionals, a lawyer and an accountant, both of whom have said, this is a bad idea. Do not do it. That is our professional advice. And Vernon has transmitted that advice to Elvis, according to Billy Smith. You know, we're only using Billy Smith's quote for this. Vernon's transmitted that to Elvis. He said, hey, your lawyer and your accountant both say this is a bad idea. I, therefore, believe this is also a bad idea. And they even say it's zoning laws, there's restrictions. They give a list of detailed reasons, apparently. And they say they wouldn't let him do it. Well, it's not that they wouldn't let him do it. He was advised not to do it, and he felt the wisdom of the advice, and he didn't do it. But Billy blames this on Vernon, which I find unfair. I don't think it's Vernon who made the final decision. I think it's Elvis. I think he could have pushed through it if he'd wanted to, but for whatever reason, he determined that it wasn't worth pursuing this part of the dream. At the same time, it's a dream that's died, right? You've got to take them both into account. He can adapt like any great general on the battlefield. He'll adapt and he'll move on and he'll get new plans. But there is the regret that this plan didn't work out. That he had put his heart out there for something and it didn't happen. And it shows him, Elvis himself, that even though he has been able to accomplish so many amazing things, there are things that even he might not be able to accomplish, or that are going to take a lot more effort than he was willing to put into it. And Linda says that, so Vernon did contact professionals. That's the first time I'd heard that, lawyers and accountants. Yeah, Elvis had a lawyer. Elvis had accountants. It's not like Vernon was doing all this with a calculator by himself out in the office. What Vernon did was he coordinated like a little army of financial professionals who were handling Elvis's stuff. Plus, he coordinated all of the responses to fan mail. So, like, there were just bags and bags and bags of fan mail coming in every day. That's what the girls who worked for him were mostly doing. They were filing the paperwork that he gave them, and they were filling out and responding to fan mail and opening fan mail, distributing it to where it needed to go, as well as the regular mail for the day. And Vernon, he was mostly reviewing reports that would have come in from these various professionals. There would have been reports from the colonel that said, hey, you made this much money. Here it is. You need to deposit it, or whatever you're going to do with it. He would have received checks from the colonel. I don't know if they were doing wire transfers or how they moved the money around, but you could see them. They're very detailed reports. And they're generated from reports that were sent from the people who paid the colonel. So there were contracts, and the colonel would collect the money from those contracts. And then he would send along his own report of how he cut the money out. And also showed that he agreed with the reporting from whoever he got the money from. And then there'd be a copy of their report, so that Vernon could see the original and see what the colonel had done, so that Vernon could verify Elvis was not being cheated. That whatever the contract said, Elvis was receiving the correct percentage. And there were a lot of different revenue streams. There were a lot of contracts, a lot of deals running at any one time. And then there were other reports coming in, like from the bank, because there was a lot of financial transactions going on. So every month, I mean, you imagine balancing your own checkbook. Vernon's doing this basically every day. He's balancing that checkbook. And he's making sure there's $1 million in the checking account. So, and then he's receiving, you know, when a new contract comes in, say that the colonel sends along a contract that Elvis needs to sign, I would imagine, and I can't prove it, but I would imagine that's the point where Vernon sends it to the lawyer, and the lawyer says, hey, I like everything about this contract, or I don't, it needs to be changed here or there, especially with these contracts that are written by the studios and RCA. They have armies of attorneys working for them, and they're using the benefits of knowledge from hundreds of contracts that they've already written. And things have already gone bad in those contracts, so they have protected themselves with new language. And the colonel's really good at a lot of that, but he's not a legal professional. So there's somebody that's reviewing for legality the contracts. So when people say that Elvis didn't read the contract, he didn't really need to read the contracts. They're being read for him. And it's not like he's blindly signing these terrible contracts that are not in his interest. People get a lot of this thing confused, I believe. They think it's like the colonel brings the papers to Elvis and Elvis signs them while he's in a terrible state of mind on drugs or whatever. And then the colonel writes new stuff on top of it. And then they go out, they do, like we've seen in movies, not necessarily about Elvis, but about people who cheat at contracts, right? That's not what's going on. Vernon is really on top of all this. And Gunn says it seems that Elvis trusted his dad very much for handling everything. Yes, that is central to the Elvis story. There are only, at this point in time, 1967, two people who Elvis trusts 100%. And one of them is not Priscilla. And none of them are in the Memphis Mafia. One is Vernon, and one is Colonel Parker. Now, people who believe that Colonel Parker is the ultimate villain, they don't want to hear that. But Elvis trusted the Colonel completely. And you have to trust a man who's handling millions of your dollars. You have to. You don't have any choice. If you don't, he is the wrong man to be in business with. But Elvis never terminated the colonel. There was one point where they had a big argument, and it looked like it was going to happen, but it never really happened. And Linda's saying that it never made sense to her that a superstar like Elvis would have his father doing everything. No, his father is the trust, right? Like, Daddy, is everything going okay with the accounts? Yes or no? And Vernon's going to say yes or no. And if there's any hanky-panky going on, well, then Elvis gets involved personally, right? That's when he starts calling the colonel or whoever, saying, my daddy's very upset. I'm very upset. I don't understand what's going on. But that never really happened because the colonel's really good at what he does, and Vernon's really good at what he does, and they're employing good people. And Gunn's saying that maybe Elvis didn't have the time. Elvis didn't want to deal with any of that. He didn't like money as money. He didn't like the numbers. He didn't like to think about it. He wanted to be able to do what he was doing, which was to make differences in the lives of the people around him. That's what he really enjoyed doing. That's why he's buying everybody a horse. Not just them, it's their entire family that's being uplifted by these horses. And then Gunn brings up that Elvis looked so proud, showing his father to the audience at one of his concerts that we looked at a picture of in a previous episode, and that was very true. They loved each other very much. And Elvis loved Gladys so much that I think it overshadows in our minds how much he loved Vernon. If Gladys had died when Elvis was very small, or had left, or wasn't in the picture, it would have been much more apparent to us how much he loved Vernon. But when he came to fame, it was his mother was there, and that went along with this story, the narrative that they wanted to push out through the media. It's not as big a story that a son loves his father. There's not as deep an emotional connection there, I think, for the reading or the receiving public. They really loved the story about Elvis loving his mother. But he did love his mother so much, and it makes it hard for us to see how much he loved the others that were around him, because he wasn't as demonstrative about it as he was with his mother. And we can also see on this slide that I've got up right now that Marty Lacker says one reason that Elvis started gaining so much weight, which was right at this time. It wasn't exactly at this time. I would say it was earlier in January and over the Christmas holidays. Everybody gained some weight over the Christmas holidays. And then Elvis's birthday is the 8th of January. And then the next week, his Uncle Pat passed away. Well, even if you were going to diet and try to stay on it, you probably ruined it for that week. Because you have all these other emotional issues to deal with now. And we all know that we probably all turn to food a little bit, especially during deep depressions. When a family member passes away, and there's that period where you can't eat. And then I think there's usually a period where you eat too much. He probably had that. And then he just kept on eating. And then he just didn't want to go back to this clam bake thing. And he just kept eating. And Marty says one reason he started gaining so much weight was because he was depressed about his career and depressed about his father killing his plans for the commune. He was depressed about not having a big house down there at the ranch. So I think there is truth to what Marty's saying. I think he's definitely gaining weight because he is not focused on his professional life. And he's not focused on his professional life because he's disgruntled with his professional life. And his disgruntlement is causing him anxiety and depression. And he's eating to compensate for both of those, the anxiety and the depression. And that makes a lot of sense for him, because when he was a kid, if you were depressed, it was probably because you didn't have any food. And you were probably hungry. And so when he gets depressed, he fights that by eating. But that's not unusual. I think almost all of us do that. I think he might have just done it a little more. And Marty says that he's depressed because his father killing his plans for the commune. Well, I don't think his father killed him. I think we've already made clear that it was professionals with their advice that said, hey, you could do this, but it's going to... And I don't think the advice is so much there are restrictions and there's this zoning laws and you can't do it. I think there's these obstacles, and those obstacles will require effort and money to overcome. And you have to make a decision if you want to put the effort and the money into it. And the cash flow, because of the expenditures on other things that Elvis wanted, may not have been there. Hi, Angie. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate seeing you here. And he may very well have been depressed about not having that big house down there, because he kind of got to dreaming about it, and I'm sure he planned out some of the rooms in his head. It was something he wanted to do. And that's the story of the house that wasn't built. But Lamar Fike, who's been with Elvis since 1957, I believe. He met Elvis earlier. Maybe it was 50. No, it's 57. He joined him when Elvis was filming Jailhouse Rock. And there's a wonderful story about it because George Klein, who was Elvis's friend from high school, had lost his job as a radio DJ. He was out there with Elvis. And this was during that period. He'd been with him for a little while now, a few months. They were filming Jailhouse Rocks. And Elvis looks at George, and George had a very large, prominent nose. It had been broken at least once. And that didn't help it any. And it was very large for his face. And he freely admits that. And you can see it in all the early pictures of George. And Elvis looks at him and says, hey, you want a nose job? And Elvis had found this plastic surgeon. And Elvis wanted to get a nose job, but he wanted to test the surgeon first with somebody who he really knew. And he offered that to George, and George took it. And while George was in the hospital, recovering from his nose job, Elvis is on the set of Jailhouse Rocks. He loses a cap off his tooth and inhales it. So now it's in his lung. But the doctor on set says, I think you swallowed it and you'll pass it through. Well, Elvis tells Colonel Parker that something's wrong. That this is not, and he did not swallow this cap. That's something, he thinks it's in his lung. He can't breathe right, and Parker's got to do something. Parker goes into full action mode, and he gets Elvis to the hospital, where they determine, hey, he does have this cap in his lung, and they have to perform a minor surgery to get it out. So Elvis calls George Klein. And George Klein, of course, is in the hospital recovering from his nose. And he answers, and he says, and this is George, and he hears that, this is Elvis. George, guess what? I'm in the hospital too. Well, meanwhile, Lamar Fike is working in Texas at a radio station. And he hates it. He thought he'd love being a DJ, but he hates it. Can't stand it. It's the most boring job in the world to him. So he calls Elvis and gets routed through to Elvis in the hospital. And Elvis listens to him for a few minutes. And of course, they knew each other from Memphis. They'd already met each other. And Elvis says, well, Lamar, why don't you just come out and hang out with me? We're filming Jailhouse Rocks. And Lamar says, well, that's what I'll do. And he hangs up the phone and he puts a record, a long play record onto the turntable, and he starts it up. He's on shift. He's there at the radio station. He goes and he gets in his car and he starts driving west. And he's still in radio broadcast zone when he hears on his station that record click off. And there's nobody there to change it. He hasn't told anybody he's left. And he drives on out west, and he meets George and Elvis out in California. They finished filming Jailhouse Rocks. And that's how Lamar Fike joined the group. And Lamar Fike says about the Circle G that after this house thing, Lamar says right after all that fell through, Elvis got this idea that if I can't give him houses, I'll give him trailers. Now, Albert Goldman, who's a guy who wrote a book about Elvis, and he wrote it in the early 1980s, he used Lamar as his main source of information. And Albert's book was really the first academic book about Elvis. Now, Albert hated Elvis, did not like him at all, said terrible, nasty, horrible things about Elvis in the book. Lamar claims he had no idea Albert was going to say these things, but it's fairly clear in short interviews with Albert that, yeah, he was going to say bad things about Elvis. Now, Albert's written other famous books about other famous people. So he is an accredited source, but if you're an Elvis fan, you're not really going to like his book. And Terry's saying this is a great live stream. Thanks for all the information. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. I know you know a lot of Elvis stuff. And Linda's saying, is that picture of a luxury mobile home what the trailers looked like? If so, wow. Yeah, that's a mobile home from the 1960s. Not one that was on the Circle G, not necessarily, but it would look something like that. And it might have had that overhang to make that porch. I'm sure Elvis went in on all those kind of, extra accessories. And Gunn saying this is a smart idea about getting the trailers. Well, we're about to find out, Gunn, if it was smart or not. And Lorna, hey Lorna, thank you so much for coming. She says that Elvis was so generous, he had a heart of pure gold. So Albert, he does not give Lamar, even though he used Lamar as the main source of the info, he doesn't give Lamar any credit for the house trailers. Now, Lamar tells another story that he was driving with Elvis by a trailer park at this point in time, and he said, gee, wouldn't it be great to live in a trailer? And that's what sparked Elvis to purchase all these trailers. So Lamar, as with all of his stories, they fluctuate depending on exactly when Lamar tells them. But they get the emotional truth right, like I've been saying. Lamar is probably the most, of all the guys, he's the most loose with the factual truth. But he certainly has an emotional viewpoint, an emotional truth for himself. And it comes through very clearly in what he says. But in this instance, Albert dismisses all of it and doesn't put any of it in his book. Albert claims at this time that a salesman for a variety of products began appearing at the Circle G when they heard that Elvis was willing to spend. And Albert says one of those guys was a salesman for mobile homes. And he provided Elvis with the solution to his housing problem. If Elvis is in such a big hurry, why should he bother constructing buildings? All he has to do is buy a flock of mobile homes, park them on concrete pads. And that's kind of where Albert leaves it, because to Albert, it really is that simple. You put the concrete pads down, you put the trailers in, and it's done. But it's not really that simple. So Jerry Schilling says, when Vernon steered his son away from handing out the land parcels, Elvis instead decided to buy a few house trailers so that there would always be accommodations for a few members of the inner circle to stay at the ranch with him and Priscilla. And we've heard from Becky Yancey that during this period, this February through March period, that although they spent the first night at the Circle G, they've really just been spending the days at Circle G and then coming back to Graceland and spending the nights, at least Elvis and Priscilla. So I think Jerry's telling us that Elvis has a desire to spend the entire day, all night, all day at the Circle Ranch. He doesn't want to be coming back to Graceland anymore. He doesn't want to do a commute. He wants to be on the Circle G, and therefore he's going to purchase accommodations for others to be around, because he needs those. He's always needed his friends to be around. And that's kind of what started this the trailers, and that they grew from there. And one of the fans, they asked Gary Pepper, has Elvis acquired trailers for some of his boys who work for him? And Gary said yes. He had a regular little trailer park in the planning at the ranch for most of his employees and their families. He bought his grandmother a beautiful trailer, and it's parked beside the one he bought for himself. Grandma told us she was going to spend lots of time in hers when Elvis returns. She said Elvis told her she now has 2 homes, Graceland and a home on wheels. Incidentally, we hear he plans to build a home for himself and a home for his dad and family on the ranch. So Gary's indicating to us that the ideas of the house and the trailer were more simultaneous. That perhaps the ideas for the houses for the Memphis Mafia fell through faster than the idea for his own home, or at least in Gary's mind. Now, Gary's not on the ranch. He's probably visiting, but he's not on the ranch. And these trailers, they're not just homes. They're emblems of belonging. Each one a stanza in Elvis's unwritten poem of generosity. Each one Elvis's way of telling each of these individuals that he wants them to be part of his myth here at the Circle G. And he's given them these houses on wheels, which he really likes himself, because they've got all the newest amenities. And his dream about these houses, this is the song that I'm going to leave you with today. I wrote this song about Elvis's dream of giving all of his friends and his grandma a house on wheels. And until I see you guys all again, you all keep on taking care of business.
He rode past Green Acres with a glimmer in his eye. Said, wouldn't it be something if my folks could live nearby? 12 trailers later, they were rolling down the lane. Concrete dreams and carpet floors, love poured out like rain. He bought one for Grandma, parked it close to his own. Said, you've got 2 homes now, no need to be alone. One for his daddy, one for his boys. He built a little kingdom, not just for show but joy. They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was a love made bold. A house on wheels with a heart of gold. The county said no, the neighbors raised Cain, but Bernie worked midnight through thunder and rain. They poured the pads, ran the lines, made it right, while Elvis rode a rising sun at first morning light. Some said he was foolish, some said he was grand, but he just wanted laughter to echo through the land. He sat on the floor near tears in his eyes, said, why do they fight me when I'm trying to rise? They called it trailer trash, he called it home. A place for the weary, the lost and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to give peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold. The house on wheels with a heart of gold. place for the weary, the lost, and alone. He fought through the permits, the neighbors, the noise, just to get peace to his mama and joy to his boys. It wasn't steel and wheels, it was love made bold, a house on wheels with a heart of